Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the newest edition of the Alumni webinar series. Today's webinar, Protecting Yourself in the Digital Age, is brought to you by Syracuse University's Offices of Career Services and Alumni Engagement. My name is Jenna Turman. I'm the Assistant Director for Alumni Programs in the Office of Career Services. I will be your host today. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to share a few housekeeping tips and reminders. Today's webinar will be recorded. You'll be able to access the webinar on the Career Services website or Syracuse University's YouTube page, usually about a couple days after the event takes place. Please limit the number of browsers you have open during the presentation. This will help the presentation run smoothly for all. If you do happen to experience technical difficulties, please find the help function provided by Adobe Connect or call the support team at 1-800-422-3623. We appreciate your feedback about the webinar series and presentation, and a survey will be distributed following the event. You can also contact me directly with any comments or feedback, or if you'd be interested in hosting a webinar in the future. I will put my information in the chat box for you as we get started. Questions are welcomed and encouraged throughout the presentation, and we will leave time at the end if necessary. Please type your questions into the chat area on the Adobe Connect webinar screen. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenter, Scott Spendolini. Scott is president and founder at Sumner Technologies, a world-class Oracle services education and solutions firm. Throughout his professional career, he has assisted a number of clients from various verticals with their Oracle Apex development and training needs. Scott is a longtime and regular presenter at many Oracle-related conferences, including Oracle Open World, Kscope, and RMOUG. His presentation at Kscope 2014, Apex Security Primer, was selected as one of the top presentations at the conference. He is a recipient of the Oracle ACE Director designation, author of Expert Oracle Application Express Security, and co-author of Pro Oracle Application Express. He is also a an Oracle Certified Oracle Application Express developer. He graduated from Syracuse University with a dual degree in Information Systems and Telecommunications Management, and he currently resides in Ashburn, Virginia with his wife and 2 children. A little about today's presentation. Let's face it, your most personal information, photos, social media, SMS messages, and even medical information is sitting right there in your pocket, and it's likely completely unprotected, let alone encrypted or backed up. With almost all of our private lives digitized, there are some critical steps that we must take to ensure our private and personal data stays that way. This seminar will discuss some easy to understand and common sense approaches to better secure and back up your personal data and protect you from those who are trying to steal it or exploit it. So I will hand this over to Scott. Please ask any questions that you have, like I said, throughout the presentation or at the end if you'd like to wait. Scott?
Great, thanks, Jenna. Morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending where you are. We're going to talk about how to protect yourself, your personal devices, your phones, your laptops, and just some general strategies on how to keep your data secure. A little bit about me before we jump into this. Obviously, Syracuse alum, 96 management and Newhouse dual. Started my career at Oracle, so right from Syracuse. I remember the dates distinctly, February 8th, getting a call from them and getting on a plane literally within 24 hours, which is the first time in my life that I did that. I've probably done that many, many, many times since, but moved down to the DC area, worked there for about 10 years. And then as situation dictated, I started my own company called Sumner Technologies, obviously named after Sumner Avenue, where I spent a good 2 years studying and maybe doing some other stuff. We rebranded our company. Sumneva was a name of a company that we had a partnership with. And then we got bought by a company called Encryption, which got bought by a company that you've probably heard of now, Accenture. And since then, about a year and a half ago, I went back and started Sumner Technologies version 2. So I'm still on my own. We've got about 3 or 4 employees. We do a lot of database consulting, application design, application development. I've worked pretty closely with Oracle. I've written a couple books about Apex, which is one of the development platforms we specialize in. And if you want to reach me, email, that's my work email. And then, of course, my Twitter handle is simply @spendle. So We focus mostly, like I said, on Oracle Application Express and the Oracle Database Cloud. A lot of what I've done in the last 3 or 4 years was pretty much security focused. We actually built a used to be commercial tool, which was a security evaluation application. Now it's open sourced. And I kind of got the inspiration to do this session based on a lot of that. But I don't want to do it as if I were talking to an Oracle customer, right? So this is a little bit of a stretch for me because I have to go a lot wider and talk about things I don't usually address, such as how to protect a $200 mobile phone versus how to secure your multi-million dollar enterprise. It's still a problem, right? It's your specific problem, and your data is very important to you. So it is worth protecting, but it's just a little bit different approach that we've got to take here. So we're going to talk about that, how to protect your mobile phone, how to protect your tablet, what you should do for your laptops, your desktops, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about passwords. It's really kind of the first line of defense, and it's usually something everybody gets wrong as far as what they do and how they create and manage their passwords. We'll finish with a little bit of a warning on scams. These have gotten pretty popular here in Loudoun County, Virginia. We'll get 1 or 2 calls probably every week or so with someone claiming to be from the IRS, Loudoun County Sheriff's Department, or whoever they think they are. And it's just good to be aware of this and share this information, especially with people who aren't as tech savvy. My parents, for instance, are ideal candidates here for a scammer to scare them into thinking they owe money. So let's talk about what's on your phone right now. And you may have an iPhone, you may have an Android, you may even have a Windows phone, I suppose. You've probably got a lot of family pictures. Pictures you've taken maybe of dinner, maybe of a vacation, friends, selfies, kids' games, etc., etc. You might have some music, and that's not a big deal. You can always get your music back. That's pretty replaceable, but your photos aren't replaceable. You might have a few games if you play Candy Crush or Slither-O, or if you have kids, particularly boys who are under 12, you probably have Pokemon Go on your phone these days. But you also tend to have banking and financial information. I know on mine, I've got access to my bank accounts, I've got access to my credit cards, I've got access to my brokerage accounts, all kinds of financial data that I don't want other people to perhaps see. Emails, both personal and work. Some people use different phones for work. Many people simply have the same phone and 2 email accounts on it. Maybe some notes that you've taken either through Evernote or just the Notes app or whatever application you use. And those notes may have some pretty personal information in those notes. Text messages, right? Things that, while you're in a meeting, you're texting someone across the table. What's this guy talking about? He's such an idiot, this, that, the other thing. Again, stuff that you really didn't intend to be public. You wanted this stuff to be private. Maybe appointments in your calendar. And again, depending on what those appointments are and who they're with, that may be something that you wanted to protect as well. And then lastly, and perhaps most privately, your medical information. I know on the iPhone, you could put in the medical alert information, drugs you're allergic to, all kinds of different information. If you're using Health Kit and perhaps using blood pressure monitors or other medical devices, all that information is there. So really it's our lives, right? This is everything we do day to day is on this little 6, 7 inch device that we carry around with us. But despite this, most people simply don't take any precautions to protect their data if the phone were to fall in the wrong hands or if they were to leave their phone somewhere. On a little bit more macro scale, most people also get passwords wrong, right? And again, raise your hands. Obviously, I can't see them, but how many people have 1 or 2 passwords that they use for everything? Most people will have a secure password, which meets the standards of uppercase, lowercase, numeric, special, and then another password they use for everything else. So if I guess one of them, I could probably get into all of your accounts, or at least the ones that matter. Also, most modern laptops and phones and PCs and tablets have a bunch of security protection enabled and embedded in them. Most people simply don't spend time turning it on, or, and even worse, they'll go out of their way to turn it off. So we're going to go through each one of these categories here. I'm going to start out with probably the most popular, mobile phone and tablets, and just talk about some things you can do or that you are not doing to make your device a little bit more secure. So what I've done up in the upper right corner here is I've kind of put an Android and an Apple logo, just assuming those are the top two platforms. So if you have an iOS device and you don't see the Apple logo, I'll be talking about something a little bit more Android specific and vice versa. So we've got at least one phone in our house these days. If you have kids, you probably have two or three hand-me-down phones, and you might have a couple iPads, and your spouse may have a phone and a couple iPads or Android devices. On each one of these phones, there's apps that contain all kinds of conduits to our private data. People don't like passwords, right? So you have an app, you never really sign in because that's the whole point of the app is that I can simply log in, click on it, and I'm in the app. So what protections are we taking here, right? Very few in many cases. If there's no passcode, anybody can see any information. The goal here, and in thinking of security as well as data recovery, should be if you lose your phone or your phone is stolen or your phone is damaged or it's gone, however it's gone, it's gone. The goal for everybody should be that it's nothing more than an inconvenience and perhaps an extra expense, meaning that no data or any personal information should go away with the phone. It should be backed up. It should be on a cloud service somewhere. It should be someplace that, again, when I lose my phone or if I lost my laptop even, I'm kind of bummed about it, but I'm not going to worry about losing all the pictures that I had or all the videos that I've taken of my family. So the number one thing you need to do is enable a passcode. A lot of people do this. A lot of people don't. I've seen it both ways, and I've seen people that I've worked with at conferences and customers that are very, very smart people have no passcodes or very, very weak passcodes. Basically, what the passcode does is twofold. It's going to offer protection against someone from getting into your phone, but it also serves as a way to encrypt the contents of the phone. This is more important. I'm not going to get into all the details about the FBI versus Apple case, but this came up and was in the public eye for a good month or two about how the phone was encrypted, and Apple wanted, or the FBI wanted Apple to unencrypt it, which they simply don't have that ability. So when you're using a passcode, you want to go to the 6-digit or more. I could sit here and say it's best to use a word, a phrase, 10, 20 characters long. No one's going to do that. You access your phone way too many times every day that's just going to get in the way and it's going to become impractical. 4 digits is simply not enough. There's only 10,000 combinations with 4 digits. They could conceivably guess that. Sure, there's ways that there's metered that you every time you guess an incorrect password, it's going to take longer and longer, but really 6 or more is best. Also, the other feature on your phone that a lot of people either turn off or don't set correctly is the auto lock feature. Once I've locked or unlocked my phone, how long are you going to let that phone stay in a state of being unlocked? Some people set that for 15, 20, 30 minutes, meaning that as soon as I unlock it, if someone else gets the phone and turns it on, they can access it immediately. I typically set mine to 3 minutes or less, meaning that as soon as I unlock the phone and I set it down, it's going to automatically lock in 3 minutes. So if it were to get stolen or lost, it's tremendously unlikely anyone's going to have any real time to do any damage or to access the phone. For iOS only, a really nice feature is the Find My iPhone feature. If you have an iPhone, consider turning this on. Basically, you go to Settings, iCloud, Find My iPhone. This lets you see where your devices are, not just your phone, but your tablet, your Macs, any Apple type device, where it is. And you can also, and if you have kids, you've probably done this, play a sound. So if it is lost or if it's under a cushion in the couch or maybe just sitting right in front of you and you just haven't seen it yet, it'll actually play a sound so you can find it. You could turn on what's called lost mode, which will basically display a message saying, hey, I'm lost. Call this number and I'll give you a reward if you find it. Or more importantly, is you can remote wipe or erase the phone from another device. So it's a really critical feature. By default, I don't think it's on. It will ask you when you configure the phone. You can skip that step, and I know a lot of people do. But it's a very useful feature, at least to see where the devices are. You've probably read about stories in the media where, a phone gets stolen, someone goes to find my iPhone, shows the police, hey, the phone is in this house. They can get a warrant and they can go search the house to try to find the phone. Another thing that I see, this actually I think is getting a little bit better as updates become easier, but there's two reasons why vendors are going to push out software updates. One is to add new functionality, and two is to add security patches. You'll hear a lot about the new functionality. So right now, if you go look at iOS 10, here's what's coming, here's the new features, this, that, and the other thing. You won't hear much about what security patches it fixes because that would be giving away a lot of information. So it is good to stay current as much as you possibly can. Apple has had in the last couple months a couple of pretty critical flaws that have been discovered. They're pretty quick to patch them, usually within a day or two when the article hits the media, they've got a fix, but you've got to make sure that you're updating that fix. So keep an eye on your settings app. When you see a little red badge that says 1 or 2, it's time to run the update. And it's pretty easy to do. Just go into settings and select software update. It'll download and install it usually within 5-10 minutes. Same with the Android. Settings about phone software update is where you want to go. Android's a little different because there's different devices and the vendors will install their own software on top of Android to manage the hardware to the device. So not every update you see is going to apply to every phone. What you want to do is just consult the manufacturer of your phone to find out where the updates are coming in on and turn on the automatic channels, right? So make sure it does it automatically. This isn't something you should have to go out and do. At least have it notify you that there are software updates available. Apps. So let's talk about apps for a second. There's lots of them out there. They range from tremendously useful to life-saving to absolutely useless. Apple takes a little different approach when it comes to the App Store. Applications are submitted and then actually analyzed and either approved or rejected. A lot of people don't agree with this, and I'm not going to get into the politics, so to speak, of whether this is right or wrong, but it does add an important layer of security in that you could feel a lot more comfortable downloading an app from the Apple App Store versus, say, the Google Play Store or one of the other Android stores. There's been more scrutinization done on that side. Now, Android allows pretty much any application to be added to their store, but they are starting to take sort of Apple's approach to look for things that are security issues and then block those applications. If you do end up downloading something seedy that is compromised, you may have a problem with your phone, right? And a lot of applications, a lot of things have been analyzed or reported in the media. They're pretty quick to take it down, but sometimes the damage is done to the tune of, a few thousand to potentially tens of thousands of phones. The advice here is just be cautious. There's really no way to tell, obviously, from looking at the description and the icon and how many reviews the app has. Stick to more well-known apps and publishers. If it is really obscure, don't be the first one to download it. Maybe wait a week or two, see if anything comes out, and then go ahead and grab it. Read the reviews. There's plenty of publishers that are very immoral in the sense that they will hire companies to write 500 reviews of the app, give it all 4 and 5 stars so that it actually makes it seem legitimate. So don't be fooled by that. I mean, reading them, you can get a sense pretty quickly as to whether they're legitimate or manufactured. A lot of grammar errors you're going to find. They'll all be the same review. There'll be similar names and things like that. If you're not sure, do some searching on Google, see if the app is legit. But best case, just don't install it. Find another one, find something similar, or just wait it out. Now, speaking of apps, all these apps push their data to the cloud these days. The good news is today, if you're using apps like, say, I'm just going to pop open my phone here, Evernote, QuickBooks, Mint.com, Dropbox, all of these apps by default store data in the cloud, meaning that if you were to lose your phone, you're not going to necessarily lose anything because it's on a different server. If that's the case, there's not a lot you have to do as far as backing up data or being concerned about losing your data. However, and really this comes down to photos, data may not be synchronized with some sort of cloud provider. And that's really the most critical section of your phone that you want to make sure is backed up. Yet quite often people ignore this. What really got me thinking about this presentation is I saw an article, it was either in Syracuse.com or the Daily Orange, about a sophomore or a junior who went on a trip with his family. His dad had passed away, and all he had left was videos and pictures from this trip. Unfortunately, he left his laptop in a backpack in the back of his car over on Euclid or one of the off-campus housing areas, and the car was broken into, the laptop was stolen, lost all the photos. So this is critical. I mean, we take so many pictures, and there's actually been a lot of really clever ads, especially the Google one recently with Queen's "Don't Stop Me Now," that highlights that we're filling up our phone with photos, and there's no more space. But the way you've got to read into that is, what if you lose that phone with all those photos on it? So you've got to take some steps that you're using some sort of backup for your photos. So on the Mac, you could use what's called iCloud Photo Library. What this will do is automatically upload any photo you take to your iCloud account. So basically the iCloud servers, you can then view those photos across any Apple device, whether it's an iPad, a Mac, an iMac, another iPhone, etc. It does cost a little bit of money if you're going to use this service. It's about $3 a month for 200 gigs and $10 a month for a terabyte. I've been using digital photos for a long time, and I fit into the 200 gig category, no problem. So start there. If you need more, it'll cost you a little bit more, obviously, for more storage. It's one option with an iOS device. On an Android device and an iOS device, I should have actually put the Apple logo on the slide, you can use Google Photos. This actually allows you to store an unlimited amount of photos in the cloud, and I believe there's no charge for this. So you can now take photos and have them go to your Google storage and stay on your phone, so that again, if you were to use your phone or lose your phone or something was compromised, you'd still be able to access all your photos. Same thing here. You could access them from any device that you have access to your Google account, be it a web browser, another tablet, another phone, etc. So two different options. One's obviously a little bit less expensive. One is a little bit tightly integrated, more tightly integrated with the Photos app on iOS. Encryption. On the Apple side, your device is automatically encrypted. And like I said, you've probably heard a lot about what encryption is, why it's important. If you were to lose your phone, you don't want people reading the files. And if it is encrypted by default, they won't be able to unless they have your passcode. So anything iOS 4 or newer, by default, it's on. You can't turn it off. You can't manage it. You can't change it. Again, some people argue, I want more flexibility. I want to be able to pick the flavor of encryption, or I want to be able to disable it if I want to. It's just not going to work that way on iOS. I'd make the argument that most people who don't even know that it's encrypted are getting the benefit of it, and there's only a small vocal minority who complain about not being able to control it. Now, on the Android side, it's a little bit different. Depending on how old your phone is, it may be enabled, it may not be enabled. So it's not a bad idea to check. If you've got a brand new phone, you're probably already encrypted, but if you've got a 2 or 3-year-old phone, it may not be enabled. So setting security encrypt phone, it probably will take an hour or so to do the encryption. And while you do this, you want to be connected to power. If it gets interrupted somehow, typically because the battery drained, that's bad news. It may not complete correctly, and now you've got a really encrypted phone, meaning that it's corrupted and you can't access anything. So it's possible to disable it, but it's definitely not recommended on the Android side. So other things on your phone, browsing, right? Simply going to your mobile browser and looking at different websites. A lot of us are probably trained to look at the lock icon in the URL bar, meaning that if I see that lock, I know that the data is being sent securely to the server. This is true on desktop, laptops, any kind of device, phone or otherwise. If that lock isn't there and you're typing in and sending information, perhaps a credit card number, an account number, or even a password, there is the potential, unlikely, but there is the potential that somebody can actually see that data as it's transmitted. So make sure anytime you do things like banking or with any sensitive information, you see that lock icon. Another thing to be aware of is every once in a while you'll see an invalid certificate error. If this happens, it really means one of two things. Quite often, it's just that that website let their certificate expire and simply hasn't renewed it yet. They usually fix it within a day or two of it happening, but I've seen it happen with pretty big name websites. The other thing is it could be some sort of malicious certificate that if you were to accept it, you would then potentially lose data, even though it's going over a secure connection. Without getting into all the specifics, there's a way to do that type of attack, but your browsers are usually smart enough to warn you and say, hey, this certificate isn't the one I expected to see. Do you want to accept it anyway? Hit no, I don't want to continue. And if it's a transaction you have to complete, call the website, email them, ask them if that's in fact the case. They'll tell you, yes, it is ours. We just need to renew it. Or perhaps, they've been compromised and you did a good thing there. Public Wi-Fi. We all go and look for Wi-Fi. Most of us have data plans that are metered, and we'd rather use someone else's Wi-Fi for free than chew through our data, especially when we do videos and share photos and things like that. Is it safe? Probably. It's probably safe, but it's not necessarily safe. And what I mean by that is when you connect to public Wi-Fi and you go to your bank's website to check your balance, that transaction is being encrypted from your laptop to the Wi-Fi hotspot and then out to the bank, as long as that's a legitimate Wi-Fi hotspot. So the thing that always worries me here is when you go to a coffee shop and you see the Wi-Fi and it says so-and-so free Wi-Fi, who set that up, right? I mean, you're literally blindly connecting to somebody else's router, and by default, data in that sense won't be encrypted unless you're running over the secure certificate-based sites. Again, most times it's the owner of the coffee shop who set it up, and they just want more customers, so they're providing free Wi-Fi. But it's possible that it's some sort of malicious connection. So just be wary when you're using public Wi-Fi, especially when you're visiting sites that aren't running over the certificate-based encryption. I am a little bit concerned about what I do on public Wi-Fi, so you may want to limit activity to non-sensitive sites and transactions, right? I'm just going to check the score of the game. I want to read the news, maybe check a couple financial stocks and things like that, but never really log into your accounts because you're just not sure that that's being captured or not. If it's possible, use a secure Wi-Fi network instead. And typically this requires you to talk to the employee or the waiter and say, hey, what's your password? I've never been to an establishment where they haven't given out the password to their Wi-Fi. It's just a more secure way of doing things. Now, if you have to access sensitive data, what you need to do is look at something called a VPN, or virtual private network. This is basically a subscription so that your phone creates an encrypted tunnel between the VPN server and your device. This then will go out to the public internet on your behalf. So anything that someone can eavesdrop in this middle tier here, where you're on the Wi-Fi router or you're in the coffee shop, is completely encrypted and people won't be able to see what's going on. Many companies have this. In fact, you probably, if you work for a bigger company, connect through a VPN to get to your public network or your private network, and then do your work that way, see all the internal servers and things like that. You can purchase VPN subscriptions for $50, $60 a year. And then quite often when I do travel, if I'm at an airport or if I'm in a coffee shop or if I have to use an open network, I'll turn on my VPN and do all my work stuff through the VPN tunnel just to be extra sure that no one else can eavesdrop on those connections. A couple more things about phones. Jailbreaking. You may have read about what jailbreaking is and all the legal stuff basically about whether vendors should be allowed to let their people jailbreak or otherwise. Basically, it's removing some restrictions that iOS puts in place. And this is just an Apple thing for the most part. Don't do it unless you really, really, really know what you're doing. Many times this creates a lot more problems than it solves. If you really want a device that does anything you want, iOS probably isn't the best platform for you. If you're technical and have a degree in computer science or understand the process and understand the risks, fine. but 99.999% of the people in the world shouldn't be jailbreaking their devices. So steer clear of that. So backups. It's pretty simple on iOS to set up backups. You go to iTunes and you pick whether or not you want to back it up to your iCloud account or to your computer. Make sure you turn on Encrypt iPhone backup. What this will do is basically take your entire backup and encrypt it so that if someone were to recover it, they wouldn't be able to restore it to a different device without your encryption password. So it's another step you've got to take to make sure that it's encrypted, but it's definitely a smart thing to do. Android, it's not as straightforward. It really, again, depends on the version of Android and the device. Some solutions I've seen involve basically manually copying files. Others are automatically backed up, so a lot of your Google account data, that's already backed up in somewhere, the preferences and things like that. There's even third-party tools that you could buy for an Android device that facilitates the backup. So I found a pretty decent site here in the slides that talk about the different steps and how devices are backed up in the Android world. It's possible, it's just not as straightforward. One last thing before we move on to laptops and desktops here. You're probably getting a phone every 1 or 2 years if you're like the average consumer, maybe a new tablet every 3 or 4 years. Basically, before you hand over your phone, you want to make sure you're not also handing over your data. And there's a couple ways that you can do this. With iOS, it's actually pretty simple. There's about 3 or 4 steps to go through. It essentially deletes your passcode, which will delete the encryption key, which technically doesn't wipe the phone, but it makes it pretty much 100% inaccessible. On Android, again, there's a few steps you have to go through. It does involve rebooting the phone a couple times. There's a few extra things that you have to do, but you really want to make sure that before you donate the phone or sell the phone or put it on eBay, you are resetting it so that it's 100% clean of your data. Quite often, phones and laptops that have old data on it can be recovered if they're not properly wiped. If you're unsure, consult the websites, or on Apple, you can always go to an Apple store. For Android, you could probably go to a Best Buy or a CompUSA or one of the stores that sells the devices, and they can walk you through that. If you have to and you're just really worried about it, simply destroy the phone first. Get a drill through it, put it in a blender, whatever you need to do. But it's not a bad idea that if you do want to decommission a phone, there's plenty of organizations that'll take it for you as a donation. They'll refurbish it. They'll give them to women's shelters. They'll give them to people who can't afford phones. There's plenty of organizations out there that can use your phone. So consider wiping it properly and then donating it. Or in the case if you have kids, that's a hand-me-down and that's what they usually get. Okay, let me check the chat here because I can't see it as far as questions here. Anyone have any questions about mobile security? All right, then let's talk about laptops and desktops. Again, I did the same thing here with the Windows logo and the Apple logo. Certain things pertain to certain platforms, and I just want to highlight which ones go to which one. So our phones have a lot of sensitive data, but that's nothing compared to what our laptops have, right? Not only do we have a lot of synchronized data between the two, but now we've got all of our sensitive business information, our work information, our scans of important documents, spreadsheets, presentations, company confidential data. So we've got to be even more vigilant when it comes to securing our laptops and desktops than we do with our phones. It's more likely you have a password on your phone than on your personal laptop. I can count on one hand the number of friends who have personal laptops that they just click a button and they're in. There's no anything. So what that means is that if someone were to steal it, they can gain access to all their information. Emails, messages, photos, pictures, anything that's on there is literally just right there. You don't even have to try. So make sure you use a very strong password for your laptop. And we'll talk about what the strong password is in a little bit. Some laptops will have biometric devices, retina scanners, or Windows can recognize your face, or thumb scanners and things like that. Those are okay to use as well. It's actually not a bad idea to enable a guest account on your laptop. Um, what's nice about it is if you have a friend over who is a little nosy and they want to check their email or do something, you could log out and log them into the guest account. And this way they're not tempted to start browsing your personal information. Also, on the Apple, if there's a guest account and someone stole my laptop, as soon as that guest account logs in and connects to Wi-Fi, it's going to update the location of the laptop. So I like doing that because it does give you that way in that somebody can actually help me recover my laptop if it were stolen. Software updates, same thing. I know they're a pain and I know they come out probably more often than you'd like, but make sure you keep things up to date. Um, Again, there's more viruses and malware on the Windows side probably than any other platform, so you're going to get the most updates there. But keep an eye on the Windows Update in the control panel or the Mac App Store. It'll show you when there's new updates. You want to make sure that you do that. And not just for your computer, all of the computers in the household. If your kids have laptops, if you've got older laptops that you occasionally use, if you've got a media center PC that you stream movies from, they all should be on a regular schedule where somebody once a week, once a month, make sure that everything gets updated. Encryption. Now, if you're using a personal computer, it's unlikely, extraordinarily unlikely that your drive is encrypted. Business computers, one that the company owns, these days it's probably encrypted. But doesn't mean that for personal you shouldn't do this. You absolutely should do this. This is going to protect your data in the case that someone does steal your laptop. They don't need your password. They could hook up the hard drive as an external drive to another machine, and it simply shows up as another drive. And then they can start browsing all the information on there if it's not encrypted. So full disk encryption is definitely something I recommend. You might see a small performance hit. The reason why I never see it is because the first thing I do with a brand new computer is encrypt the disk. So I never know that it might be a little bit faster, and you just don't even remember and you don't even care. So it's something that's, I think, essential, very transparent, very unnoticeable on the day-to-day activities of the user. So on the Mac, it's something called File Vault. If you go to Settings and Security and Privacy, click on File Vault, and then click on Turn on File Vault. It might take a few hours. It really depends on how large the hard drive is and how fast your computer is. But while it's encrypting it, you can go about your business. You can do anything you want. You can even restart the computer in the middle of an encryption process and it'll be just fine. On the Windows side, more modern versions, I think starting with Windows 7 and above, embedded a tool called BitLocker, which does the same thing. If you're on an older version of Windows, I would recommend upgrading Windows first, but if you can't for whatever reason, you're going to have to look at some sort of third-party software. But under the control panel, system and security, BitLocker Drive Encryption, it's pretty much it. You turn it on, it might ask you a couple more questions, but it'll go ahead, and again, it might take a few hours to encrypt it, but it'll go ahead and do that process. I typically do it at night right before I go to bed, let it run overnight, and then by the morning it's usually set and ready to go. Another thing to be concerned with, especially if you're on a laptop and you're on different networks, is a firewall. So a firewall is basically, it can be a physical device, but on your Mac or your PC, it's going to be software that controls which applications can talk to the network, both on an incoming and an outgoing basis. So this is going to prevent a hacker from trying to access different ports or different ways into your computer. So if your firewall is enabled, it's unlikely you're going to need to have to change it. You simply turn it on. For most consumer-based firewalls, that's all you really need. And it really just protects other people from trying to access your laptop, especially on strange networks. On Mac, simply stay on that security and privacy and turn on firewall. It'll be activated usually within a second or two. There are ways to allow specific programs through the firewall. It's rare you'll have to add them, but if you do, it'll typically guide you through the steps in order to do that. On Windows, it's just as easy. Go into your control panel, System and Security, Windows Firewall, and enable it. Again, it'll be immediately enabled. And you'll go ahead and all the transactions that people try to do or try to access your PC will be blocked. Public Wi-Fi, I kind of give the same advice for mobile and desktop and laptop. Just be really cautious as to what you connect to. Try to use the secure, the encrypted version, not the unencrypted one. On a Windows side, there's actually a little bit more security you can do. You can actually select public network. This is going to limit what types of transactions or network traffic rather can access your computer. For the most part, if you're just doing web stuff and email, that'll be fine. But it is recommended that you do select public network when you are on a public network. You can't trust anybody next to you or anywhere else on that network. This gives you a little bit more protection. Viruses, another thing that's pretty popular. It's been really one of the top threats, I think, to the PC world forever, and it's not getting any better. There's a couple steps that you should take to protect this, and this really applies these days both to Windows and Mac. So there's plenty of different antivirus software out there, and it's designed to go out, find the viruses, neutralize them, make sure that those files don't do any damage. On Windows, I'd say absolutely. You're crazy if you don't have it. On the Mac, I'd say that it's getting there. There's far fewer viruses on the Mac because there's far fewer Macs out there. It's also a different type of operating system, but more and more we're seeing Mac-based malware show up, and this trend is on the rise as well. If you don't have it on the Mac, I wouldn't panic, but it's something I would consider to start looking into. On the Mac, you can get free solutions. Avira, Sophos are both good products that secure things, but there's also some commercial versions too. Usually the subscription fee will be about $50, $60 a year. They'll also offer different versions of protection. And this is where you've got to be a little bit careful here, because typically you just need the virus protection. A lot of these tools will lure you in and say there's a professional version or there's an enterprise strength version. Look at the differences, the different features, and quite often it's features that you don't need or you might already have another solution for. It's not going to protect you any better. It's just adding on functionality. So in most cases, the basic versions are going to be enough if you're looking for just basic antivirus stuff. Now, if you have Windows Defender is included at no cost. It's pretty decent. It's not the best out there, but it's also very unintrusive in that it doesn't install anything else. There's no ads that pop up for some of the free ones. That's how they make their money, obviously, is through ads. If you need more protection, you could take a look at either Avira, Bitdefender, or Kaspersky on the commercial side. Same comment here, right? Keep in mind that the professional versions might just be overkill, and all you're looking for is some basic protection. One thing that most people don't do is when they get a new laptop or a new computer, they give themselves administrator privileges. This way, it's really easy to install new applications. They don't have to enter passwords all the time. It's just kind of what you do. It's your computer. Why not be the administrator on it? This is probably one of the most dangerous things you could do, because if you're an administrator and you do get malware or you do get a virus, then that malware or virus can actually execute as an administrator. So what I've always done for quite some time is create 2 accounts on every machine that I have. I have an administrator, which does have the admin privileges and has a different password than my user. My user is what I log into every day and where all my files are and where all my applications are. If I need to manage something or run an update or do something that requires administrator privileges, I have to enter in the admin username and password. It's a little price to pay for a lot of peace of mind, knowing that if there were to be some sort of malware, it can only do damage the same way that my account could, not an administrator account. so I can mitigate what could happen in the case that someone did compromise the account. Backups, right? This is huge, especially on the laptop side. It's a little bit easier on the phone. A lot of your stuff is in the cloud on the phone. That's all app-based. But think about the photos, the videos, the documents, music, emails that you have on your laptop. Now think about never being able to access any of that ever again. I see this story happen way too many times. People basically laptop theft, or more likely this, right? You're sitting there. I was literally at Christmas this year setting up my old MacBook for the kids to use, and I had a nice Christmas beer sitting right next to it, and my father-in-law threw a football, and my son missed it, but the beer didn't. And it looked just like that without the lemon and the ice. Totally toasted the whole machine. Dropping it. I'll never forget my boss at Oracle whose laptop got ran over by himself in a rental car. Put the bag down, went to load the car, got distracted, backed up, and literally crushed his own laptop. This is way more common than a hacker breaking in, right? Or fire, right? So let's say that, we don't want it to happen, but your house catches on fire, your car catches on fire, and your laptop's in it. These are the more common scenarios to worry about. Not someone hacking into your laptop, but the day-to-day dangers that can happen. So it's critical you've got some sort of strategy in place. The goal here, again, is to make it as nothing more than an inconvenience and an expense. Never losing data. We should be able to go and re-download all of our data within a day or two from when the laptop is compromised or broken. So backups employ something called the 3-2-1 rule. And it's pretty easy to understand. 3 copies of your data, 2 different medium, with one of them being stored in a different location. So what a lot of people will do is copy 1 is the master copy. That's what's on your laptop. Copy 2 is using some sort of backup software, burn a DVD, but take that DVD and put it in a different building. If that means going to the bank and putting it in a safety deposit box, great. If that means putting it in an envelope and sending that to your brother or your parents or someone else, don't keep your backups in the same facility, because if there is a fire and your house burns down, your backups are going to burn with the laptop. And then number 3, more so today than ever before, is some sort of cloud-based backup service. This way, your files are not just on a DVD in someone else's house, but they're in a cloud service. So if your laptop were to get burned down or broken, you could restore it from either one of those 2 places. There's a number of great cloud-based services. They're all about $60 to $100 per year. It's a very small price to pay. Pay attention to a couple things, data limits and the number of devices that they allow. Some are going to give you a better deal than others, but again, expect to pay a little bit for this. There's also cloud storage. Now, a lot of people use tools like Dropbox or Google Drive, OneDrive, etc. These are going to be either free for a very small amount of storage, perhaps a gigabyte or 2, or they might cost upwards of a couple $100 a year. There's a difference between a backup and storage. Storage is used to actively manage your stuff. So I have a Dropbox account, and most of my business stuff and my personal stuff sit on Dropbox. But I also back that, as well as all my photos, as well as all my videos, everything else, to a cloud backup service. So it's not a bad idea to have 2, right? Because these cloud services, every once in a while, they go out of business. It's not beyond the possible for one of them to get hacked or one of them to actually lose or corrupt your data. So it's not a bad idea here to have 2 concurrent strategies, a backup and a storage strategy in place. A couple more things here, and we'll get into the passwords. Home network. Make sure that's secured. And if you've bought a router in the last year or so, it probably is. If you've got a 3 or 4-year-old router, it's probably not. WPA2 personal is the minimum you should have enabled. If you see an option for WEP, it's older and insecure and very easy to break into. Make sure you set a good passcode, right? And we'll talk about a good password in just a minute here. Update your admin password so that it's not the default. Quite often, if you see a Linksys router sitting around, you can log in with admin password 1234. Most people have never updated that, especially older ones. A lot of routers these days also have guest networks that you can configure. This is a great place to put the neighbor's kids or even your kids. So they're on technically a separate network, but they're accessing the same internet. It just keeps them a little bit away. One last thing before we jump into passwords. Any public computer, typically you'll have hotels with business centers that have these computers for your use for free. Assume they are riddled with viruses, malware, keyloggers, and anything bad you can think of, because they probably are. Don't use them for anything that you wouldn't feel comfortable asking someone in front of a group of people. Who won the game? What's the weather? Is my flight on time? Don't print your boarding pass there, because you're likely logging into your airline account, which if there is a keylogger, they could intercept that information and steal all your miles or compromise your account in other ways. So use them for the occasional stuff. Your kids want to play a game on them, great, but never, never put anything in them that you wouldn't feel comfortable screaming in the lobby so that all the other guests can hear you. Any questions on the laptop piece, laptop and desktop? Okay, let's talk about passwords, and I think we'll have to go through scams pretty quickly here. Run out of time. Most people do this. You have one or two passwords. One is the more secure password, and one is for everything else. You rarely change them. Let's be honest. How many people fit into this category? More than should. So here's the danger of taking that approach and using the same password everywhere. Let's say that there's 3 sites that we're going to do business with: Chuck's, Darwin's, and Sutter's Mill. Some of you may recognize those names. My account name is the same on all of them, and I've used my horrible password here, Auto44, for each one of them. Now I go about my business, and then one day all of a sudden, Sutter's Mill gets hacked. And what that means is that someone got the list of usernames and passwords. However, it doesn't matter how they got it, but they got it. So they now know there's an account, Scott, password Auto44. What they can do is go to the other sites that they think I might have an account on and try those same credentials. So not only did they hack one account, but they hacked all 3. Now think of these in the terms of the real world. This could be Capital One, this could be Facebook, this could be Twitter. Most people will have a combination of those 3 accounts. Maybe it's Capital One, and maybe it's Hotmail and Facebook or Google. People are creatures of habit, so using the same password everywhere means all it takes is one person to find it on one site and then get your credentials on any site. So in this example, Auto44 is a horrible, awful password. No one should ever use it. It's got a common dictionary word. It's way too short. There's no uppercase and there's no special characters. Good passwords are going to have 2 things. It's going to use as many possible characters as it can, lowercase, uppercase, numeric, and special, and be longer in length. So the longer the better. I would say no shorter ever than 15 characters. It will not contain dictionary words, and contrary to what a lot of people believe, it doesn't have to have a high degree of entropy or randomness. It can be pretty structured and still be more secure. Here's 2 passwords. Which one's better? So the one on the left, uppercase D, 0, lowercase g, ... Or the one on the right, which looks pretty random, right? It looks like a pretty solid password. The one on the left would take 63,000 years to hack. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that. The one on the right would actually only take 5,000 years. Now, you don't have to worry about that number either, but as computers get faster, this time is obviously going to get shorter. Why is the one on the left better? Let's break it down a little bit. 1 upper, 1 lower, 1 numeric, 9 special. Down here, 4 upper, 3 lower, 1 numeric, 3 special. So a better blend of special characters, but the prime difference is the length. This one is 11 characters, this one is 12 characters. And that's really what we need to consider when making a password. Take a look at this chart. Whoa, someone just hacked my presentation, it seemed. Here we go. Take a look at this chart. What I did was create basically a password, and I'm just adding a period to it each time. So here's about where we were 800 years, or 63,000 years rather. Adding another period makes it 5 million. Removing a period makes it 800. Removing 2 periods drops it into the perceivable category of only a month. Removing 3 periods, I could have it done by the end of the day today. As we go up, now we're looking at 450 million years by adding 2 more periods. A third period is 34 billion years, and then a fifth period is 3 trillion years. Length makes a huge difference with your password. There is no way to determine part of your password. And that's why length matters, is I've got to guess it all or I get nothing. I can't spin through the first character and guess D and then spin through the second character and guess 0, right? It simply doesn't work that way. And you've seen it on TV way too many times of it working that way. That's way more dramatic than waiting 3 billion years for a computer to come back with the correct password. So when you create a password, keep these things in mind. Start with a common word, right? In Syracuse would be a horrible password because I can crack it instantly. Put a couple uppercase characters in there. It's still pretty bad. Add in a couple numbers, but don't put them at the end. The hackers are now understanding that most people will put the first character upper, a bunch of lower, a number or two, and then a special character. That's a horrible pattern because now they can search for just that space rather than any combination. And if you fit that pattern, you're going to get found out sooner. So adding a 4, 4, and a 3 in there got it up to 4 days. Dropping 2 special characters in there bumps it up to the 5,000 year space. And then what I recommend is add a phrase. So G-Town sucks might be a good thing that we all remember. 336 sextillion years to crack that password. I don't even know how long that is, but I know I'm not going to be around for it to matter. If you take this type of formula, you can get a pretty secure password pretty easily. But the problem is, no one's ever going to remember this, ever. So what you want to invest in is a password manager. What this is a little piece of software that remembers all of your passwords for all of your accounts. It's protected with a single strong password. So perhaps this password here, and don't use this exactly, right? Create your own strings, create your own iterations here. This is your master password that protects everything. Once you've unlocked everything, you'll now be able to grab any password for any site, automatically plop it into the web browser when you go and access that site. Password managers are great because they also look for duplicates and they'll tell you how many duplicate passwords you have. They'll also look and identify weak passwords, so those that don't meet the criteria we just talked about. And in some cases, they'll even notify you that this website that you have an account on had a data breach. You better go change your password for that account. So a bunch of them are out there. I use 1Password. I like it, but there's Dashlane, KeePass, LastPass, RoboForm. A lot of these will even synchronize across devices or not if you don't want it to. So my 1Password iPhone app always is in sync with my Mac's 1Password app. So if I change a password on my iPhone, it'll automatically update my desktop. I like 1Password because it also allows me to just basically take notes, but those notes are automatically encrypted and protected by my master password. So if I'm working with a client and they give me credentials to their server, I always make sure to put them in a secure note rather than leaving them an email where people could a little bit easier get to them. Another thing to consider, two-factor authentication. A lot of sites are employing this. What this basically does is introduces that second factor. So it's typically your cell phone where once you log into the site, you will get an SMS message sent to your phone that contains a code. You then have to provide the website with that code before it lets you in. The premise here is if I were to get your password and log in on a different computer with your username and password, I would then need to be in physical possession of your phone to get the code to truly let me into the site. Much less likely that I'm going to have your phone, unless, of course, I stole your phone and then I've got everything. But the two-factor authentication is definitely something to take a look at. Most sites will say, I'm going to trust you for a month, and then after that month expires, you'll get the code sent to you again. Tried to find the cheesiest hacker clip art that I could. I think I did a good job here. Create a change your password day. There's really no easy way around it. You're all probably scratching your head going, wow, I've got 60, 70, 80 accounts and they're all using my simple password. That's my dog's name and my favorite number. You've got to set aside some time to go through and invest in a password manager and basically just reset the world. If you're not using accounts, don't be afraid to deactivate them. It's typically harder to find that link because no company wants you to not be an account. But it's a liability. If it's sitting out there and not being used and it's got a weak password, someone may be able to get into that account and potentially do some damage. There is a site you can go to, and it is a trusted site. Have I been pwned with a P instead of an O? You could type in your password or your username here. I'm sorry, your email account, your username that you use, and it'll tell you which sites have been compromised and if you're on any of those lists. So, for instance, if I go here and type in my email, it's going to say at least the Adobe and the LinkedIn hack did breach my account. Now I've gone and changed my updates since then, but the LinkedIn account was pretty recently, May 2016. Any questions? I think we're running out of time here, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Just jump to the summary slide. So more and more of your personal details are becoming digitized. You've got to take some ownership. You've got to take precautions to protect them. A lot of these are common sense recommendations. Many just require a little bit of guidance that hopefully the slides are going to help you. First line of defense is always a strong password. Hackers rely on people choosing horrible passwords to break into accounts. If you take that extra step and get a nice 15, 20 character password, you're going to protect your stuff against 100% of the hackers out there. They are getting more creative. Again, verify any call that you get or any email that seems suspicious, any attachments that you see in an email that you're not sure of. Don't open them, delete it, pick up the phone and call the sender, especially if you know the person. It's unlikely some random stranger on the internet is going to send you an invoice and say, click here to see it. Don't open those. Those are a real bad idea. Any final thoughts or questions? Hopefully this opened your eyes a little bit as to some basic things you could do to protect yourself. It's just getting worse and worse out there, and I think we as a population just need to be on the offense and really think things through when we start using these digital devices as we have been for years now. It's just way too easy for people to compromise them if you don't take the right steps.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. It was definitely valuable. A lot of stuff to pay attention to out there in terms of privacy and safety for our data and information. So thank you so much for taking the time to go through this. We will post the recording in a couple of days, and there will be a survey sent out with that link as well for you to share and go back and review if you want to follow up with any other information. So we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar in September, which will be personal branding. Keep your eye out for the registration information for that in the weeks to come. And again, if you have any questions or comments, always feel free to reach out to me. And everyone have a wonderful day and week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.